Hello, welcome to FinTech Impact. I'm your host, Jason Pereira. Today on the show, I have Nick Babinsky, Chief Product Officer of Solutions by Text. Now, normally I have to give you an explanation for what the actual product they are supporting is, but I think that this is the most on-the-nose name I've come across in over 400 episodes of podcasting about FinTech. So yes, Solutions by Text is a company that basically helps empower companies through text SMS and whatever other protocols are currently being used in the text realm to basically engage consumers. And with that, here is my interview with Nick. Nick, thanks for the time today.
Jason, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so am I. Nick Babinsky of Solutions by Text. Tell us about Solutions by Text.
As you picked up from the name, we are quite literal and a bit of a mouthful in our branding, but we also go by SBT. What we do is we work with financial services, businesses that serve consumers and help them move all those communications and engagements with consumers to more conversational and messaging-based interactions.
All right, so that's great. Let's talk about the history of the company. How did it come to be?
Yeah. So two founders in Texas were early in the SMS scene and realizing that businesses stood to not only save quite a bit of money over traditional channels of communicating. So think about all of the cost that goes into printing and mailing a communication to a consumer, a borrower, a member of a financial credit union, or even fielding phone calls, right? And so these brothers really scaled up the original SBT. And then over the years, hundreds and hundreds of businesses across a variety of verticals and industries started adopting SBT to deliver text messaging really in highly regulated markets, right? Whereas, hey, listen, texting technology exists out there today in a lot of different places. If you or I are ordering our lunch from DoorDash, we'll get a notification over text. If we got a delivery coming over Amazon later on, we might get a text. That text message is super hard to send in highly regulated spaces like banking and fintech to consumers, because there's a lot of folks watching out for the content, the consent, and the compliance around those messages.
Highly compliant, compliance heavy industry, big surprise. So let's take a step back and talk about why it is you would want to send a message by text, besides the fact it's a normal channel and distribution. Can you talk about a little bit about the engagement metrics that you have around text-based comms?
Yeah, absolutely. We just did a study in the third quarter through Datos Insights, who works a lot in the banking space. And one of the stats really struck me is that 40% of consumers now prefer text-based communications from their bank or fintech versus an app. So what does it tell us? Lots of us are spending millions and millions of dollars building up these apps and maintaining them. But we all feel it in our consumer life, right? I got a lot of tiles on my phone. I got a lot of people asking me to download their experience and navigate it and save credentials and learn it. Whereas texting is pretty ubiquitous, whether it's with my friends or my families, members, it's easy. So if I can create real experiences that get the job done for me, whether it's getting a new card or paying off a bill or anything like that, I want to send a text. It's real time and anonymous and has a lot of other perks to it. So that, I think that is one of the statistics that I think really stands out.
So I will say that I think there's a causality here that's relatively easily explained. And that's that I think you're right, where we have a flood of it. But the reality is when you go into when you're getting a push notification, right? The question is, what's the job to be done, right? What is the job to be done in the context of that message? And when you get it in text, it's pretty much got to tell you the job to be done. Now, maybe it could be massaged to be less wordy or whatever else, but if you're effective, you can be very effective in a text communication, especially if you don't abuse that channel and only use it as needed. It's incredibly effective. The numbers I saw on the response rates compared to every other form of medium is insane. Whereas in the app, it's like, oh, if I get this notification, it's great. Like now, where am I going to navigate to in the app to basically do that? Whereas like typically it's click this link to then go through, which is going to come back to the how we prevent fraud. But question, we'll talk about that later. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me based off of other studies I've seen, but also just off of the nature of the medium. The nature of the medium is not as ambiguous as an app that I haven't opened in 6 months.
Yeah, I think it's direct. But one of the other, or maybe two of the other sentiments we hear time and time again is real time and anonymized. Sometimes these conversations you have to have, whether it's, hey, it's a late payment, or I need money to get a medical procedure done, or I'm trying to secure my first home. These are really complex conversations that sometimes if you can navigate it in a more anonymized fashion while keeping it real time, it really supports a consumer sentiment and demand we're seeing for how they want to be treated and how they want to be served.
Yep, I would agree. All right. So basically, we have the metrics of engagement. Let's talk about the regulatory aspects of this because you're right. First off, there's general regulation. Can you speak to the general regulation?
Yeah, we as consumers, particularly in the United States, are protected by quite a number of regulations. One of the primary ones being the TCPA, which basically prescribes how businesses can interact over telephony channels with consumers. So you've got federal watchdogs, you've got the Visa MasterCard equivalent of the telco space, which are Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, right? There are the industry network operators that have their own rules. You've got state by state, you've got association-based policies. So these are similar to even the PCI, if you think about it, organizations like the CTIA or TCR. There's no shortage, I would say, of bodies and regulators prescribing how businesses can interact and communicate with consumers. And texting is one of those areas, as you alluded to, which is really seeing an increase in a challenge relative to bad actors and fraud. And so sending a message in and of itself is challenging, particularly when you're dealing with financial matters and consumer information. It becomes all that much more sensitive. So there's quite a number of levels to it, if you will.
Excellent. All right. So that's the broad aspects of it. But then let's talk about the specific verticals, right? Every highly regulated industry has its own set of compliance regulations. Speak to how you basically are able to navigate that entire complex web.
Yeah. And that gets a little bit to our story too, right? I mentioned the founders brought this business to a point where it had hundreds of customers. And in 2021, our main backer and Edison partners invested because we really had devised a way where we could navigate both the high regulatory oversight, but also the ones that affect particularly collections agencies, banks and credit unions and fintechs, right? And so when you're thinking about those kinds of interactions, there's really two fundamental types. There's marketing and promotional, and there's account-based, right? And those two sets have their own intricacies in terms of when I can contact you. What is my sentiment? Is it harassing? How many times is too many times to contact Jason, for example, in a single week? And so what we do as an organization, it's not just building the bits and bytes. We are spending a disproportionate amount of time looking at how banks, credit unions, fintechs, collections agencies are regulated and what policy is moving at the federal level, state level, and the association level. And then basically building that into the intelligence that sets guardrails for our customers in these conversations. One of the more fascinating things in my 2+ years here at SBT has been learning about not only the messages out and how you need to protect the consumer, but also messages coming back in to protect the business itself, right? We don't want our businesses seeing sensitive account information. We don't want our business customers seeing even bad language, right? And so there's a lot that goes into building software that can programmatically enforce those guardrails relative to compliance in the kind of financial services arena.
I hadn't thought about the bad language aspects when it comes back in, but I can understand the need to protect your employees from harassment and whatnot, which is entirely possible. And then, of course, so that's just the communications aspects of that. Let's talk about what you're doing besides the screening mechanisms to empower the compliance departments. So I'm sure you're rolling up reporting and flagging things as needed.
Yeah. And that's one of the trickier parts because the threshold for being compliant, it's a moving target and it's getting to be higher and higher. One of the more challenging rules that have come out in the last 12 to 24 months is the fact that you or I, if we're sending a text message to a consumer as a bank, for example, if let's just say Susie responds, I don't really want to receive messages anymore. That is considered an opt-out, which is hard because previously all you or I had to do was look for the word stop and we could unsubscribe Susie in this case. Now the expectation is that everyone who plays in this arena has to screen for intent. And you can just think about the number of ways you and I can express intent, not just via sentences. What if I send an emoji? What if I send a picture back to you? A colorful picture. Are those forms of intent that are being communicated to a lender or bank or a collector that need to be respected as an opt-out? Because if not, if you're missing those opt-outs, you're getting fined, you're getting audited, and you might get suspended from sending communications over a channel that's very quickly becoming one of, if not the most engaging and economical ways of interfacing with a consumer.
Excellent. All right. Talk to me about some of the more nuanced, or I would say more unique aspects or implementations you've seen. When you think about just sending text, it's just sending SMS or sending secure text, but there's various multimedia ways of basically enhancing this experience. And there's even ways to drive traffic to the locations. What are you able to support, first of all? What are some more novel uses that you've come across?
Yeah, and I had to laugh because still in 2025, I find myself in customer meetings with multi-billion-dollar organizations, and they say, text. What do you mean by text? You send one-time passcodes. And that is where the creativity sometimes stops when it comes to what you can imagine over a conversational experience. So some of the more creative examples of what we do is, we think about the entire journey of the consumer with a bank, with a lender, with a collector, right? Everything from considering a product or service all the way to pay the bill and back. So thinking about you or I, if I get a message from our bank around a 3% cashback card, maybe I'm interested. And the banks for the first time are using these messages to collect feedback, because rather than just jamming down emails down your throat or pieces of mail in your mailbox and saying, Jason, consider this new card, consider this refinance offer, consider this. They're asking for feedback. Hey, Jason, they will respond the yes if you want to receive more offers about credit cards with higher incentives. Click this button in a message over text if you want to get refinancing options, or respond with what you might need to help in your own personal financial journey. You have kids going to college soon. You have a home project that needs support, and actually using conversational responses to inform and provide intelligence back to the business that can actually create personalized and effective marketing, rather than this kind of spray approach that marketers are still often using to try and get response and kind of conversion, whereas conversational engagement becomes much more intelligent, frankly, for both sides of the conversation. So marketing use cases, particularly when you think about, hey, if Jason raises his hand by responding with a keyword or a sentence or pressing a button, and then programming this interface so I can give you a real-time video that is 15 seconds that talks to you about the latest program of how you can actually use this loan product and load it into your personal checking account or your Venmo account. There's so many ways that we can reimagine what these conversational messaging interfaces are used for, versus just unlocking an account or giving a notification to a consumer about the latest transaction occurring on a card.
Yeah. So that raises the interesting question of the conversational aspects of this. How much of this is being handled with humans or versus technology?
Yeah, I would say that there's three camps right now of businesses that are using the platform. Number one is, the first camp is they've got agents or humans in the loop, and they're, instead of staffing the proverbial call center, they now have almost texting centers. So the same agent or loan officer or marketer that's sitting in a call center has an inbox right in front of them that shows them the messages that are being responded to their consumers. And you're routing those messages based on topic and subject matter expertise, or even priority or urgency. So human in the loop is probably the most common still to be in play. The second is probably the more recent last 5 years, where you start to see more workflow automation, still not intelligent, right? But it is more conditional. So you can route a consumer similar to an IVR tree down a certain path where they can ultimately get to the right link, they can get to the right agent, they can get to the right part of the application to deeply link into, okay, Jason wants the high rebate card and you can apply for it here. That's kind of the second camp. I think the most interesting camp, the third group of businesses, are starting to plug in systems to actually inform intelligent interactions without a human in the loop, right? Where they're investing in making those conversational experiences actually effective and get the job done without requiring a human. And typically what we're seeing is those, again, whether it's a bank or fintech or an agency, they're mapping out the highest value interactions that consumers have with their organization, and also the most costly and timely for them to field and facilitate, and prioritizing the intelligence around those interactions to be more effective in enabling a consumer to get the job done over a conversation.
Okay. Now, excellent. Like, it's no surprise that they're turning more and more towards technology and less to humans, but at the same time, the human in the loop aspect, especially when it comes to something as, look, chat bots have been around for a long time.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, but pre-LLM chat bots are things that I wanted to punch my screen over. Just horrible experiences, no matter
You always
how.
get stuck.
You always get stuck, or it's just, oh, please select one of these 4 things. Those 4 things are the thing I need. And so then, please help fill out this form with information you already gave me, to then have someone else contact you. And it's just like, why did I bother? So it's troublesome. So not surprising that humans, especially if you want, again, to have an experience that is positive for people and not have them feel stuck, you would keep them in the loop at this point. Now, let's go over to the other side of this, and the other challenge you face, as I mentioned it already, is, look, there's a lot of fraud that is basically being started by way of text. How do you, I guess, first off, what are the considerations or how does that impact what it is you do?
Yeah. So I got to be honest, it's probably the number one thing that we think about in our business, right? Because as effective and as economical as texting is, it's becoming increasingly hard to get the trust of the consumer, and rightfully so. I think every business that we serve wants their consumer to mistrust or not trust bad messages and really recognize theirs as valid. So I'd say there's the long-term solve and there's the short-term solve. Short-term solve is doing things like allowing the consumer to initiate the dialogue with the financial institution, as an example. So if I send you a bill, Jason, for your monthly auto payment, and I say text 55377 pay to make a payment, you can trust more likely a instruction coming from the website or the actual statement of your lender or your bank. Another way of doing it is when you're actually going through your account opening process or you're acquiring or originating that loan, have the loan officer be trained to send you a text message, not only to validate your identity in your device, but also, again, start that conversation with you. So there are things you could do to establish that linkage, that trust at the start of a relationship or throughout a relationship. But really, those only go so far. There's probably 50 other best practices that we talk about as a business in terms of making sure that your phone number that you text from is on your website, is on your statement, is on the email signature of the loan officer or the agents that consumers deal with. There's a ton of these best practices. Not using so many numbers is also a great starting point. But really long term, this is not lost on the carriers like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. It's not lost on the federal government. It's not lost on a lot of the device manufacturers like Apple, Google behind Android. So what's happening now, finally in 2025, is we're doing away with this whole notion of getting random text messages from unknown numbers, right? We're implementing what's called rich communication services or RCS.
Yep.
What the heck does that mean? You might have started to see that on some messages that you get, but largely it's became a thing here in only the second quarter of 2025, where you or I might get a text message from a bank that has no random 5 or 6 digit or 10-digit number. It's just the name of the bank, the name of our lender, their logo, that check mark. It says verified by Verizon or verified by Google, verified by Apple. And what we're going to see here unfold in the next probably 12 to 24 months is consumers really exclusively trust those messages from businesses versus the ones that continue to come from the short or long codes that aren't saved or aren't recognized by the consumer. We think RCS is the solve. And what's nice about RCS is it also is then going to layer in over time more opportunities for things like end-to-end encryption. And we're already seeing some of the rich capabilities drive pretty substantial response and engagement rates from consumers. They're using it.
I think there's an entire getting them used to the concept aspect. It's going to take a little while. People are going to look at this and say, what the heck is this as a starting point? But yes, amazingly, we're still on protocols that predate the internet at this point, and it's problematic.
It's a lot of change in industry, as we've seen with payments and as we've seen with many other areas. But I think this one's finally breaking the dam.
This one's going to stick. Yeah, don't take forever. Fair enough. It's actually, and throw this out there. Part of me wonders, like some of this stuff has to be actioned either on websites or through apps. There's only so much you can do through text, just given the limitations of the medium. Has there been, I'm curious, have you seen any kind of discussion to allow for the app to link to the actual testing app itself? Because I would think that there's a layer of security right there. It's like, hey, if you can natively chat within this, or it's going to push to your messages, and messages will now interoperate with that app. Is that something that's been on the radar at all?
Great question. RCS, even other OTT over the top messaging platforms like WhatsApp are challenging the limits of what can be imagined in terms of just pure functionality in a message. So what makes it that an app or an HTTP internet-based experience really can be richer? Why is that? If the technology at RCS allows for things like interactive media, tracking, video, buttons, if you will, as an example, I can send you an RCS today that gives you a carousel of options or products to choose from, and you can click a button in there to open up an app. Now, you can start filling out that application in RCS-based message. And all of that data and all that information is going to hit our APIs just as if an app is submitting that information, just as if a web form is submitting that information. I think we really are going to be challenging the notion of how much do I have to navigate into a website or into an app to get the job done. When a lot of these interactions happening between a consumer and a financial provider are pretty transactional and not
Relationship based in a lot of cases. If they are, look, especially in my industry, we've seen plenty of fines given out for texting in non-approved channels and whatnot. The ability, there is a need for both, right? There is the need for interpersonal communications within text because clients are, look, respectfully, they're going to message you the way they choose to message you. You tell them to do it a certain way, they're going to do whatever feels normal to them, right? So it's not surprising that people are getting into trouble for this, but the only solution is not to give out that phone number, give out one that's in a secure channel. But the fact they were getting, instead of driving it back to the app, they try to make it live natively in the experience. It makes me think like how much of this is just simply due to the fact that no one outside of China managed to crack a WeChat-like experience where everything exists within this one app, right? Like in theory, a lot of these companies like a WhatsApp could have driven a lot of this internally, but they don't have full penetration like SMS. So
I think there are certain factors that I won't get too deeply into.
as to why that happened, yeah, we understand the factors given the company.
Support the success of one entity over the other. I think that one of the things that I think you and I chatted about is half the battle or war is always adoption, right? And how do you get adoption? If you are at a super app where you can do everything from, you better believe I'm adopting that because it makes my life so much easier. But a super app, in fact, requires so much collaboration, levels of collaboration we're not going to see between the banks.
Oh, look at the last time we tried to create a quote unquote super app. Look at Libra, right? Look at when Facebook came up with a crypto platform and it was like, oh, this is a great idea. Too bad Facebook's in charge. So let's figure out how not to trust each other. The entire consortium, they had to leave it. They literally had to leave the entire thing. And I don't even know what the state of it is at this point. But the point is, I think that there's too many entrenched interests, too much competition, not enough cooperation, no incentive for the cooperation. Or there's no bottom line is someone's going to try to exert control over it. And if that's your competitor, you're definitely not going to allow that to happen.
You're hitting on something so important, right? Because I think we as technologists or practitioners, we get sometimes so theoretical about the future could hold and like what we could design to build a better mousetrap. I think our premise at SPT is, can you make what is ubiquitous and simple better, right? Damn it. Text messaging is just, it's simple. It's ubiquitous. You cannot influence what carrier I choose to use with, what kind of device I choose to buy. I am texting friends, my families. This is how I'm managing my communications. And if you meet me where I want to be met, I am more likely to do business with you and interact with you in a way that is fast and meaningful. And it's just shocking though, Jason, because when we did a survey, it was 1,500 consumers who in the last 12 months have had an experience taking out a loan or being in the collections process. And only 22% said that they received any kind of consistent message or opportunity to text. And when you look at the other kind of data points, which 60% of consumers rank texting in their top 2 forms of communication with their financial providers, there is just such a limited set of opportunities for the consumers to actually engage in this channel. And I think that's why we're only now starting to see industry come together and address fraud, the industry come together and address what is possible in the messaging channel and say, oh, we're actually going to think about how to tie technology in to make the jobs to be done actually possible over messaging. And that's what we're seeing examples of. And the results is incredible, right? Because again, we can talk about cost savings all day long. When we look at people or banks that put in two-way texting as an example where a human is in a loop, they're dropping call center volume by 40% because they're offering in their IPR, press 1 if you'd rather receive a text to resolve this. Hey, why don't I follow up with you over text message so that if you're making dinner right now at home, or if you got to go to work, we can pick this conversation back up when you're ready. It's the perfect storm, if you will, in a positive sense of what's kind of happening between the industry, technology, consumer sentiment, which makes us so excited finally for this.
Yeah. You kind of hit upon something really early, which was like the old technologist belief that we just built the better thing that everybody's going to flock to it. And we get so caught up in the fact of the things we can do and the things we understand that we forget that the litmus test is not us. You talk to most guys in Silicon Valley and it's like, oh, why am I talking about financial advisors? They're not going to exist anymore. Yeah, I've been hearing this for 20, 30 years now. Thank you very much. I remember one guy's like, oh yeah, I'm not sure if my company's gonna be worth much because it's a great tech company, but like with vibe coding, people can catch up quickly. And it's just, dude, people can't use Excel. Like the bar is not the group of people you're talking to who understand what the future holds and basically understand all of this stuff. The bar is, I won't say it's your grandmother, but I'll say the bar is my wife. She's not overly technically savvy, doesn't want to be. And as long as she can find it user-friendly and get job to be done without complaining about it, I'm thankful. And that's the average user. They want an experience they don't have to think about.
Yeah. You made the point too, that as much as leading a product at SPT would love to say, messaging is going to win out 100% of communications. There are still going to be folks that want to call and talk to a human. There's still going to be folks that want to go to a branch location, perhaps, and take out a mortgage. And it becomes equally important recognizing that truth and saying, how do you not build in a vacuum? How do you know that if Jason emails someone back and says, hey, I don't want to receive communications anymore, that it also enables us to realize that and say, we probably shouldn't send a text to help that financial services provider avoid a fine, a complaint, that type of thing. I think dealing in the practicality of consumers are different, right? Both in their generational habits, but also preferences, allows us to have more success. And I think our customers have more success in kind of just dealing with those realities.
Yep. Agreed. All right. You've accomplished this much. We've gone over RCS now as changing things. Where else do you see this going?
Oh, yeah. I think that there's a number of enhancements or kind of evolutionary waves here that not only RCS will unlock, but one of the things that is just becoming clear too is mobile wallets, right? And so I think we're really excited about the bill pay use case. We rolled out support for Apple Pay and Google Pay some time ago. And then when a consumer receives a payment reminder or bill reminder, 50% of those transactions are completed using Apple or Google Pay or some other kind of mobile wallet option. So I think that just enabling bill pay generally to be prompted over a message and then fulfilled via mobile wallet is going to be the de facto way that bills are paid in the future. No need to get an email link, log into a portal, navigate that site, add your credentials, make a payment. To do that over a simple text, paying at the speed of text is now getting to be like just single digit seconds. So pretty excited about that and the continued rollout and realization of just the efficacy and speed of bill payment using messages plus mobile wallets. That's one big area. Any questions on that?
No, I think tying that into mobile wallets, that's interesting. Jurisdiction, that's another set of like regulations you got to cope with, right? Like the capabilities for what you're capable, you can only endorse or support what the jurisdictions are going to let you do in the first place. Like the nature of so funny, it's almost like back to the why are we using text in the first place, right? It's like we have to meet people where they're at and we have to work within the confines of what we have. And it's, jurisdictions have to allow for certain things to exist for you in order to support them. And you're going simply where people are, right? Yeah. So you can be the communication portal between the two, the frequently accepted and easily adopted one. But it's overall, you're hamstrung by outside forces to some degree.
Some degree, yes, absolutely. And I think that's our job, is to enlighten and educate those forces. I think probably the most provocative thing we see is the cell phone number becoming more important than the social security number or other identifiers.
Well, you're not the first one to ask that question, because in some jurisdiction, the cell phone number is the social security number. That's a reality. In some jurisdictions, people don't have a government issued number, and government benefits are attached to a phone number.
Yeah. And you are increasingly associating things to that phone number. Like we just talked about mobile wallets. What if you have communication preferences, right? Both, whether it's, hey, I prefer to receive SMS or WhatsApp or messaging in general, or perhaps I only prefer to receive messages between these hours of the day, right? Or these types of messages from these types of providers of mine. And so I think one of the opportunities and questions that we're asking ourselves more and more, because based on what we're hearing from our customers, is there's so much attached to my consumer's cell phone number. What can I do to protect that, but being utilized to drive a more personalized, rich experience for the likes of Jason, who may want to port over those preferences from provider to provider based on his continuity with that phone number. So for us, as someone that sends text messages to the overwhelming majority of the US consumers, just based on our hundreds and hundreds of banking and FinTech and BPO and agency customers, we're starting to think more and more about that and what it can mean to drive a more effective relationship between providers and borrowers or debtors, consumers.
As someone who's had the same cell number since he was a high school student, I totally understand the relevance of that being an anchor point in someone's life. Yeah. And driving, and again, I can't even begin to think of how many different places I would have to change the contact information. It's actually frightening to think about what that would mean. It would actually be easier for me to change my government issued number with the number of vendors I would have to go to, because there's fewer spots that it exists.
100%.
So before we wrap up, there's 3 questions I ask everybody on a positive note. The first one is, if you had one wish for something you can change in your company or the industry as a whole, what would it be?
I do think my one wish is that RCS, the rollout, would become available to 100% of consumer devices and plans overnight. The reality is
A lot of old cell phones to deal with, my friend.
there's quite a bit of a long tail here in that. That's why you say a wand, a magic one, that's the way I'm wielding it, because that's
It would take a magic wand.
but we're getting to we surpassed the 50% mark. We're seeing most of our customers reach between 60 to 65% of their consumers using RCS. We automatically fall back to MMS or SMS or like to send over WhatsApp if we can't. But I think RCS, to the earlier part of the conversation, boy, oh boy, is it exciting what you can reimagine over a conversation on the list.
Please take away my legacy bottleneck. Yes, I get it. No more if then or factoring in for two levels of two different possibilities. I get it. Second question is, what's been the hardest challenge or the biggest challenge in the company to where it is today?
The easy answer would be tell you compliance, but I think that's been solved, or we continue to solve for it by investing just a ton there. There's the people and software and partnerships. I think the reality is education. I think going back to part of the conversation where we said a lot of folks just tweet texting to one-time passcodes or account alerts. My wish would be for folks to really see and appreciate just the impact that it can have in their business and the relationship with consumers. A lot of times, when we go into new organizations and relationships, we don't ask them how they're texting today. We just assume they're not using text to the full extent capability. We're asking them, what are your highest value direct mail campaigns? What are your most important email campaigns that are the least effective? Start there and realize that folks like Jason are a lot more likely to respond and engage with your content in your company if you send this in a different way and we can show you. So that realization and appreciation is something I wish it could happen a little bit faster.
Well, I'll tell you, first time I saw the open rate numbers, I was immediately floored in comparison to what I was used to from every other media channel. But then I also simply looked at my own behavior and thought, yeah, I can see that. I can totally
How
see
many
that.
times are you checking your phone?
Let's not go there. I may have a problem. But like, the reality is that how many people truly ignore the indicator on their messages versus I am an inbox zero guy. I get anxiety around even my wife. She's like, oh, I have 350 messages. I'm like, how do you live? And then I have one friend who refused to actually ever archive stuff. And he used it. He said he referred to it as his OCD detector. And if you saw his 25,000 indicator, it was just, there's a version of hell that if I ever go to hell, I would place in, and it will be the inbox that can never be cleared. And that is my hell.
Respect to you as a former inbox zero guy who's trying to get back to the level. It's hard. I respect the fact that you,
Dude, there's a reason that they invented snoozing.
True.
Just be better about that. It's like between the calendars, snoozing and archiving and unsubscribing, it's all doable. Anyway, and just getting stuff done. And lastly, what is it that keeps you getting up in the morning and keep on fighting the good fight?
I think there's the stories and the results that we're seeing. So when we just, for example, went live with a major auto finance company and the positive sentiment expressed by the company in terms of saying, this is so much damn easier than having to follow up via phone to our customers who haven't paid yet and just giving them a real-time anonymized option to pay us as an example. And then actually they have shared with us feedback they've gotten both on Google reviews as an example or email where people are thanking them for giving them a better option, a better experience. I'll put it this way. We exist as SPT because we just imagine a simpler world instead of options for consumers to interact and transact with their financial providers. It doesn't have to be as hard, as painful, as intimidating as it is today. And if we make that experience much like it is to engage with your friends and family over your preferred medium in a way that you can trust, and gives you the ability to have a job be done on a timely basis, that is the end game we're shooting for. And what we think we're on the way. The evidence that we're seeing is what keeps me getting up every morning and excited to build.
Excellent. Nick, thank you so much for the time.
Jason, it's been great. Thanks so much.
So that was Nick Babinsky of Solutions by Text. Hopefully you enjoyed that and grew a new appreciation for a older form of comm that we would all not live without these days if we had the choice. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please review on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or visit your podcast. And until next time, take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Woodgate Financial, an award-winning financial planning firm catering to high net worth individuals and their families. To learn more, go to woodgate.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, or find more episodes at jasonpereira.ca.